I messed up tonight. I lost another fight. I still mess up, but I'll just start again. I keep falling down. I keep on hitting the ground. I always get enough to see what's next. Birds don't just fly, they fall down and get up. Nobody learns without getting it wrong. I won't give up, no I won't give in till I reach the end and then I'll start again. No I won't leave, I wanna try everything, I wanna try even though I could fail.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Zootopia Minute, a minute-by-minute podcast where we analyze Zootopia 1 minute at a time. This podcast has been inspired by the Star Wars Minute, created by Alex Robinson and Pete the Retailer. I'm joined here with my friend Simo. We both want to do a podcast, so we thought this would be an interesting way to get into starting podcasting again.
Yep.
I am known as Stratos. You can follow me on Twitter at meta_artist. And I am known, I guess, in the fandom, well, the My Little Pony fandom and South Park fandom for drawing a lot of fan art. My income comes from vending at different conventions. And I just like watching movies and stories. And that was a horrible introduction, but I have no idea what to say. All right, you take over.
Hi, my name is Simil, or Cole is my actual name. Most people call me by that. Whichever you prefer is fine. Basically, in the MLP fandom, I'm known mostly for a number of different cosplay. I staff for both Everfree Northwest and for BronyCon. At BronyCon, I'm the official Hoofbeats mascot actor person. And I guess that's mostly what I'm known for. We're here to watch some Zootopia. It's funny, you were saying that you're known in the Pony fandom and the South Park fandom, and I was reminded, I think you told me once that in the South Park episode about the slash romance between, who even was it, Tweak and Craig,
Yeah.
I think, they used some of your art on the screen briefly.
See, that's the thing. So this is our test run episode, and I'm not even sure we're going to post it, but I actually had no idea how to introduce myself, and I'm not sure if I want the South Park fan name to get out. But I think my first real fandom I got into was South Park. That's why if you look at my DeviantArt page, it's known as South Park Taoist. I was raised a Taoist, and I like South Park, so that's where the name came from. So I think the first experience to a fandom I really got into was South Park. And that was a very different animal, no pun intended, from My Little Pony, which is, I think, the fandom where we are both currently active in for like the last few years. Mm-hmm. We know each other from conventions. I currently kind of do conventions as a living now. I do a lot of panels at cons, but I make my income from some of my artwork at a lot of conventions. I also was a senior staffer and con chair for a lot of cons previously in the My Little Pony fandom. And I'm surprised there's no South Park fandoms, considering how big the entire thing is.
See, that's interesting, though. Like, I think about that, too. A question a friend posed to me, like, sort of shortly after I got into the whole brony scene was like, how come this doesn't exist for SpongeBob?
Yeah.
That's also a
Wait, was that
popular
me?
show. Why aren't... No, it wasn't you. You
Because
may have also brought that up.
I know I brought that up with you because if you guys don't know, so this is like probably our third attempt at starting a new podcast. We previously tried to do a convention podcast, and I think I saved the name Con Artist for a bunch of them because I thought, hey, play on words. I'm a convention artist, and con artist would be a fun way to do a podcast. I think that's actually been taken by one of my friends. She goes by Spider Jewel. She's
you mean
half,
Jenny?
Yeah, Jenny. She's half of the Sherclops poems who do the Friendship
I know
is
Jenny.
Witchcraft. It's funny because within the last few days, she exploded in popularity because of her Suicide Squad
because she
video.
started posting these sort of like short humorous vlogs about the new Star Wars movie, I guess.
It was the Suicide Squad one specifically.
Oh, really?
And okay, I remember because I remember the morning I woke up on YouTube. I'm not following her personal account, but the morning I woke up, her video was trending on YouTube, which surprised me.
It's
And
crazy.
I looked at
first
her
saw the
viewer
film on
count,
Reddit.
and her viewer count was like triple that of like other big reviewers talking on the same subject, like Comic Book Girl 19, Jeremy Johnson, the others. Like, but her video was like increments more than those, which was kind of interesting. But what is funny is because what I wanted to bring up was we actually started recording our con artist podcast like months before, but I think she beat us to the punch because she started doing her own series of videos on YouTube called Con Artist. I think she started them after us, but because she uploaded them before us, I think that's her. She claims the title now.
I mean, to be fair, it's an easy pun to make, and
Yeah.
it's not the first time I've seen that used in places. I've seen panels called how to be like at Everfree, there was a how to be a con artist panel, which was just how to run an art booth in the vendor's hall at the convention.
That's funny. That's actually that's the name of the panels I'm doing at some cons coming up as well. And actually, related to Zootopia, I'm actually starting a webcomic. I was going to call it Con Artist because I thought it was a great pun, but I'm changing to Great Con Artist because I want to make it different, I guess. Make it great. I don't know, but I wanted to do a anthropomorphic webcomic with animals in the style of Zootopia, but it's about a fox who runs an art booth. So it'll be kind of semi-autobiographical of my experience vending at different conventions, but it'll kind of play on the word of, foxes like Nick in Zootopia being like sleazy con artist types.
Right.
But then play on words on a convention artist. So, I don't know, that's just an idea. So that's why, I think I'm going to grab the fox mascot just so I could use that for a webcomic.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you work as a bunny. You good with bunny?
Sure. It's
Bunny boy? Alright.
It was funny you asked me what animal I wanted to be, and I'm like, you're not gonna just force me to choose my fursona.
I'm essentially
on the spot.
telling you to create a fursona, yes.
Well, there's a joke that I'm a Great Dane, but I won't get into that now.
Oh my god. So, actually, I don't even have a fursona, but I'm not... That's actually another thing, because... So, we're doing a Zootopia podcast. I think most of our guests and listeners are going to be mostly within the My Little Pony fandom, because that's where we kind of have our connections. But there's also portions of My Little Pony fandom that overlaps with furries, and I think if you talk to most furries, most hardcore furries, they say, oh, bronies are essentially furries, while a lot of bronies say, no, I don't consider myself a furry. So there's that whole entire debate of if you're a brony, are you automatically furry, or all that stuff.
Yeah, I've heard that same debate from every direction, and I have my opinions on it, but
But
whatever.
It's like, yeah, we don't have fursonas because I don't think you're not furry, right? You won't consider yourself a furry? Okay, I'm
No.
currently not either. I think I've only been to 2 furry cons, and to be honest, I don't think I was as impressed with them.
And it perhaps bears saying that not all furries do have fursonas. That's not necessarily a prerequisite.
Yeah, it's not. That's not a prerequisite. Though,
Very common.
by the time someone does create a fursona, they most normally are a furry.
Unless they just make it ironically, which a lot of people I know have done.
Okay, just a question: do you have a pony-sona?
I do, that I hardly ever use.
Yes, I actually now I remember. I drew it for you once. Okay,
You did.
I was wondering, like, yes, you do, because most people associate you with hoofbeats. While I think most people associate me with my with a Tumblr blog I did called Chocolate Pony. So, but I don't think so. Technically, hoofbeats is not your pony-sona, and Chocolate Pony is not my pony-sona. But that's what people identify us with the most, I think.
And the weird thing is that Hoofbeats wasn't even like an internal design. They outsourced their mascots. They did a contest, and those 3 were the winning entries.
Which is an interesting way to do it, because Lord I know, working as head of design for a bunch of different conventions, most of the time how the mascots for these other pony conventions are designed is because whoever the person in charge, like the concert and stuff, will probably want their quote-unquote old C shoehorned in as a mascot. And I'm bad at designing mascots. If you've looked at the BabsCon mascot, one of the characters is named Silverspan. He's all blue. Blue mane, blue coat, blue eyes, just because I like to color them blue. So
Blue is a great color.
if I design stuff, it's going to be all blue.
Gotcha.
Alright, we are currently at minute 0 to 1 for Zootopia. And we are, if you guys want to follow along with us, we are currently watching the Ultimate Blu-ray Edition of Zootopia. And I think they should technically all be synced. But the minute we got is basically the title credits, and it cuts off right as the Zootopia logo fades away. So we got to actually see the Disney opening. I think that's the new opening Disney uses with the sketch of Mickey Mouse.
Oh yeah, the old Steamboat Willie thing. Yeah. Have you actually seen that whole animation?
I have
classic
not.
Disney piece?
You know, it's funny. If you guys don't know, at a lot of cons I actually give lectures and panels on the history of like art forms and storytelling. So I actually know a lot of these different works, but I don't think I have actually completely read or seen a lot of the works I talk about.
I mean, judging by all the things you talk about, that would take ages. So
I know, like, I talk a lot about, I think, Ulysses, but I haven't read Ulysses completely. I talk a lot about, with Citizen Kane, but I haven't seen all of Citizen Kane, which is something yeah. Spoilers. It's a sled. No, but, I think, Watchmen is one that I completely read.
I remember you talking about Watchmen a lot in that panel.
I think that's, I did that panel again at Otakon, recently. And I think Watchmen kind of worked for when I was, so if people don't know, I do a panel called Transformative Art, where I talk about the evolution of how art transforms over time, and what it is. I kind of try to show what might be a derivative art form and what might be a form that's inspired by previous work, but tries to transform it into something new. And the example I use is Watchmen, Before Watchmen, and Pax Americana as the three works to compare them to each other. And at pony conventions and anime cons, I normally use Watchmen, which is interesting because there might be some fans, otaku and bronies, who do read and understand Watchmen, but more or less they don't. And I think I did that consciously because if I talked about like works from the My Little Pony fandom, or if I talked about specific animes, people already will have like a personal emotional investment into them and won't understand the points I'm trying to get across.
Ah, interesting.
Well, yeah, I guess that's probably why, because I guess if I did something like talk about Akira and Evangelion, there's going to be people with already specific opinions and stuff on these different works, like nostalgia and all that stuff. And actually, I don't think I've given this panel at a Comic-Con. Like, I've done sci-fi cons where I use Watchmen and Pax Americana, but I haven't done it at a Comic-Con, so I'm wondering what the reaction would be if I did it at a Comic-Con. But that is for another time. Actually, those are another podcast I want to do. A lot of people tell me I should put some of these panels up online as podcasts.
Yes.
Hopefully someday. But, so we got the title credits, and it ends right at the Zootopia logo. Actually, it's very jarring because I think the last few Disney and Pixar movies I've seen, you have kind of like a teaser opening, and then it switches to the main theme song, and then the title credits appears right after that. This one, we have the title Zootopia appear right away, and then it fades. Do you think that was an interesting way to do it, or do you think the title credit should pop up later, like probably when she's going to town, like on the train to Zootopia? Think that would have been a better time for that?
Oh, like if they had instead done some sort of cold open?
Yeah, like,
where
like open right, I guess spoilers for the next minute, but opening right as you see that little bunny hopping through the forest.
Right. I was fine with it being where it was. It was very impactful, because I think this was a very anticipated movie, too. When the previews were going around, I remember seeing them for the first time. I forget what movie they were before, but thinking like that was like the one film amongst this big group of trailers that I was seeing that I thought like, okay, I absolutely have to see this. So I think it was hugely anticipated, and that's a good thing to take into account whenever you're looking at a piece of art, is what was going on contemporary to the time it was released. And a lot of that could have to do with, how is it being received already? We haven't released it yet, but already you're going to be getting feedback based on, little teasers you show, that kind of thing. Similar to how the new Ghostbusters film, before it was even released, was already getting like massive negative backlash.
Or Suicide Squad as well, which is a more, I guess, recent example where I think DC went back and actually changed stuff based on test audience responses, and they hired the company that made their trailers to recut the movie.
I don't know if I like that necessarily. Like, I can see how, like, you know, from an economic standpoint, if that's going to help you maximize your profit, sure. But, like, part of me feels like if it's a narrative, why? I don't know if
it takes away from the director's vision too, which is something that I stand for. It takes away
from the director's vision, and it's like you're changing aspects of a story based on how people are responding to the story, and like. There are definitely circumstances where that's fine, but if you do that all the time, then everything's just going to become like a homogenous mess of nothing really interesting in media.
I guess we're not doing a Suicide Squad podcast, but since we're on the topic. So what I heard was David Ayers, who made...
I mean, first of all, sorry to interrupt, but I should say I know absolutely nothing about Suicide Squad other than the title. No, I don't know what it is. I only know there's a movie called Suicide Squad. I have no clue.
You know the Joker and stuff is in it, right?
I know it's some sort of superhero thing, I guess.
You haven't seen any trailers?
No, I know nothing about this whole movie.
The first trailer aired at San Diego Comic-Con last year. Mm-hmm. And it was actually a really, really beautiful trailer. It looked really dark. It looked really moody. This was very, very close to the director's. So the director's original vision, director David Ayers, he's known for working on the Fast and Furious movies. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to envision like a kind of Spec Ops dark type of DC movie. And you could see, from the reports I heard, they said they had like psychologists and psychiatrists on set to make sure the actors and director didn't go crazy and stuff because it was supposed to be a really dark, moody thing. The first trailer that came out moved everyone away. It blew everyone away. It was set to a song, a cover of a Bee Gees song called The Joke Was On Me. And it was just masterfully done. It was a really, really beautiful trailer. And you see the first time the Jared Leto Joker appears. This is the first time someone has played a Joker since Heath Ledger passed away. And the Jared Leto Joker just scared people. Though, of course, there's criticism with all his tattoos and looking like a gangster. And then, I think, it was really after, I guess, Guardians of the Galaxy became really, really popular. You know Guardians of the Galaxy. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
Okay. And you know how they have, like, 80s music set to the story, and it's a very, very lighthearted story?
Yeah, so it had this almost kind of, like, pulp sci-fi kind of cheese to it.
Yeah, and you see, I think that's what DC was trying to market Suicide Squad as, because after the Comic-Con trailer, the first official trailer that was released was cut by Trailer Park, which was a trailer editing studio. And right away, it was set to Bohemian Rhapsody from the band Queen. And it was really, really lighthearted and fun, and it looked like, I guess, a Guardians of the Galaxy type movie. So it was much more upbeat, much more lighthearted, and a lot of the fans, I think, liked that trailer as well. It was actually, I think what people say are the trailers, the first two Suicide Squad trailers are like art pieces. They're like better than normal trailers. They're like art pieces on themselves. And this was around the time when Deadpool became really, really big. And of course, Deadpool was rated R, but it was a lighthearted superhero type movie that wasn't brooding. And this is where, I guess, reports of the first cuts were being made, because David Ayers' original movie was like more dark and stuff. So they, I guess, from what I heard, DC tried to recut it to make it more in line with like what people were liking from Deadpool, which was funny because they cut a lot of the Joker scenes out, and they, while Deadpool was like the first superhero movie to be R-rated, and you assume a movie called The Suicide Squad should be an R-rated film, they made it PG-13. I think the original intention was to make it R, so I think that was a big mistake. And then the second big change is when Batman v Superman came out, which was supposed to be their big cash cow of the year. It was, I think, the most anticipated movie.
And I heard that one didn't do super well either, huh?
Yeah, well, to be honest, okay, I'm not a fan of either. I even though I talk about comic books, I don't know anything about these characters aside from their histories, and I don't really care too much about these characters. So, I'm not a DC or Marvel fanboy, but I watched something like Batman v Superman, and I watched something like Avengers, and to be honest, I don't really see too much of a difference, aside from like story beats and character stuff. Like they're like kind of the same, like typical Hollywood big blockbuster type summer movie. schlock.
Well, I also feel the whole format of this iconic superhero versus this iconic superhero is kind of gratuitous to begin with. Like, it's if you have that as a concept, it's obvious that you're sort of playing off of
because
the popularity.
It was the same time when Civil War came out for Marvel. But I think specifically for DC, this was a big thing because never before have we had a crossover between a cinematic Batman and a cinematic Superman. Because there's been a bunch of Superman movies before, and there's been a bunch of Batman movies before, but we never had these two characters in the shared universe. And this was the first time it happened, so it was big for that. But as you probably heard, there's a lot of negative reaction to Batman v Superman, and it got a lot of negative ratings on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. And the criticism was it was so dark. It was supposed to be a lighthearted movie, I mean, as lighthearted as you could get with having two big-name superheroes beat each other up. But the criticism was it was too dark. So from a lot of YouTube reviewers talk about this, and there was a scramble afterwards to recut. So they basically, I think Suicide Squad was basically done at that time. They went back to reshoot things and recut things to make it more lighthearted. And you can see this is very, very evident because a lot of Joker scenes are cut out, which was, I guess, their big draw initially was Jared Leto as a Joker. Apparently, they said like something like 15 minutes was cut out, and he's only on screen for like 7 minutes now. And if you watch the trailers for Suicide Squad, you see a lot of scenes that were in the original trailer are gone. And if you watched, I saw the movie, and there are a lot of jarring cuts. So there would be a scene, and if you saw the trailer, you saw that it was kind of like a dark, brooding scene. In the version I saw in the movie theater, there would be like a abrupt cut and then a joke inserted in. So you could see it was like a lot of crazy editing. So the original director, David Ayers, he had his own version of the movie, and then DC hired the trailer park company to recut their version of the movie. And their version, they added like the humorous songs, made it kind of more like Guardians of the Galaxy. They put in a lot of music, funny graphics. They made it all like Hot Topic-ish. And they had test audience watch both movies. And the test audiences liked the trailer park version instead of the original director's version. And that's what played in all the theaters. So the director's original version wasn't even played. It was the one that was cut by a trailer company. And it's funny because I think it's now the third or fourth week that Suicide Squad is in theaters, and it's still number one in the box office.
That's the thing. Oftentimes these movies will get really panned by critics, but they'll still do fine in terms of money, so it doesn't
It's making good money. It's number one at the box office, yet it has very, very low scores on Rotten Tomatoes. And then bringing it back to a movie you mentioned earlier, the Ghostbusters reboot, that was like almost the polar opposite, because while everyone was anticipating Suicide Squad and really, really liking it, and finally when it came out, it got a bunch of bad reviews, Ghostbusters was really, really panned before it even came out. Everyone was hating on it, and if you look on Rotten Tomatoes now, it's like 70 on Rotten Tomatoes, which, you know, it's average, but
not
still
great, but not
it's
awful.
still fresh on their rating. And Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman are like in the 30s and 20s. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a whole lot of different factors that went into the Ghostbusters thing too, because whenever you have a movie that's trying to reboot something that people have a very specific fond memory of, there's always a lot of things you got to be careful about. The same kind of thing happened with Jurassic World as well. Now, have you seen Jurassic World?
I have.
So, this is my personal opinion. I thought Jurassic World was a good movie. It wasn't fantastic. It certainly wasn't as good as the original Jurassic Park, and I think a lot of that had to do with it not really working well as a standalone film. Like, if you look at Jurassic World or the new Ghostbusters or any of these films that are kind of reboots of an old concept, you need to pay attention to if they still present that concept in a way that looks good on its own, or if they're just kind of playing off the old one's success. Like with Jurassic World, there were interesting things that made it unique, but most of it relied on the fact that it was a Jurassic Park reboot.
Yeah.
It was all calling back to Jurassic Park and making these historical references to, like, years ago on this island, this park was here. And it didn't really bring a whole lot of new stuff to the table. So if Jurassic World existed and Jurassic Park didn't, I don't think it would have been good as a standalone film. Perhaps in the same way that the people that don't like the new Ghostbusters don't like it because it doesn't seem to really hit those notes that the original Ghostbusters did. It doesn't have that
Yeah,
same
like
kind
the
of
humor,
campy,
ad-lib humor and
yeah.
stuff.
There's just so many. You just can't remake a classic like Ghostbusters. It
Yeah,
can't be done.
I remember seeing the original Ghostbusters, but I didn't see the new Ghostbusters. But like you were saying about the reboots and stuff, it's a common trend in Hollywood. Like we see, like, you know, RoboCop reboots. We've seen new versions of the Terminator, all that stuff. And I think people were saying the most successful franchise to do a soft reboot was Star Wars with Force Awakens, where it had just enough callbacks to the original material, yet also introduced a lot of new characters to take the franchise forward. But then I think what's interesting with all these different works, Force Awakens, Jurassic Park, Lost World, or whatever, Jurassic World, I guess, and, you know, Ghostbusters and even Suicide Squad is, I think the social aspect, where a lot of people felt like they were obligated to see Ghostbusters, for example, because it was an all-female cast. It was, I think, mostly female producers and editors and all that stuff. So I guess it goes back to the whole entire, like, division with Gamergate and all that stuff. But you had a lot of people feel like, no, you had to see it as an obligation because it helps support, you know, feminism and stuff. And I know that that's why people were trying to say you should see the new Star Wars as well, because, you know, Star is a strong female protagonist, while Jurassic World got critiqued by, I think, Josh Whedon on Twitter for playing to similar stereotypical feminist tropes about females. And what's also interesting is, like, I think basically the star of Suicide Squad is Harley Quinn. It's the first time we see a film version of Harley Quinn, who's one of the most famous female villains.
That is interesting.
So,
I always just think of Tara Strong when I think of that character.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, which I don't think it's stuff that we want to talk about, because we want to talk about the more fun side. But I think there's also the social aspect where people are bringing that into a lot of these movies they're watching. Like, they have to give it a good review because it says something, or if the view is against what they might politically disagree with, they give it a bad review automatically or try to boycott it. So, yeah, no, it's a very touchy thing. But I guess that goes back to the movie at hand, which we're talking about, Zootopia.
Yeah, it's a Zootopia podcast.
which people are, it's funny because you see the both sides of the argument saying that Zootopia is a strong feminist film because it has the star is a strong female character, while people say it's also, quote unquote, more egalitarian because it shows different females in the police force. Judy wasn't the first; it was like there's a female elephant in the movie.
Yeah, that wasn't really the point of it. It was more so the species difference.
Yeah, species difference. So I guess that when we move on to that later, we'll talk about that when we get to those minutes. But it is interesting that we are at that time, we are in that culture, both of us are millennials, and we are kind of in that age where, you know, like Bernie Sanders ideas become very, very popular. We have Tumblr, we have all this stuff. And so you see a lot of considerations for, I guess, social ideas and progressive ideas kind of bleeding into how we see or critique art. And I think it's very, very evident with the Hugo Awards that just took place at Worldcon this weekend, where you had, I think it was called the Rabid Dogs or the Sad Dogs, which they turn themselves as hard SF, hard space opera folks who want to see hard SF win awards again, while their critics call them right-wing white supremacists, which I think is kind of unfair, just to name call people if you don't like them. But you have a movement that's more conservative, more right-wing, that was trying to block voting so that more traditional science fiction, fantasy books and short stories and movies won different categories within the Hugo. And you see the Hugo Awards in the last few years being won by female writers, African writers, minority writers, especially Ken Liu. He seems to win all the short stories. But that becomes something that seems to have more social awareness within the block voting. Especially with what surprised me was, I think the shoe-in for best television episode for the Hugos should have been the Doctor Who episode. It was directed by a female director, but it was masterfully done. It was a fantastic episode. Like, it's one of the best episodes of Doctor Who since it began.
Was this a recent episode?
Yeah, it was a recent episode. It was a really experimental piece. Like,
okay.
if you've seen,
I don't want to hear too much about it because I am behind on Doctor Who. And I need to catch up.
I think, you know, I love experimental episodes. My favorite episode of BoJack is the underwater one, this one for Doctor Who was really cool because it's just Peter Capaldi. That's it. It's just one actor in the entire episode. It's just him talking to himself trying to escape a maze.
Oh, that
And
sounds hella legit.
The way it's shot, it's so good, and the twist at the end, it's a scientific. It's like a science fiction trope that we've seen done poorly many times, and they do it so well in this episode. So the director, fantastic director, female director. I think it's the first female director for the Moffat era of Doctor Who. It's a fantastic episode. I think it stands alone as not just the best Doctor Who episode, but one of the best episodes of television.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to. What is this episode called?
I think it was the one right before the finale. It's called Heaven. I think it's called Heaven Sent.
Okay, I'm gonna have to remember that. I really need to catch up on that show too.
It's good.
Make a note.
Yeah, this season is really good. But yeah, that one. People are saying he should be nominated for like the BAFTA, which is the British Actor Award. He should be Peter Capaldi alone should be nominated for Emmy for that and stuff like that. But then the television show that actually won was the season finale of Jessica Jones. And I just finished watching Jessica Jones last night, so I actually just saw the finale, and the finale was good, but it's the same as almost any other finale I've seen for these types of Netflix shows. It was like well shot and stuff, but I didn't see anything experimental, anything artfully done.
And that is a Netflix original, right?
Yeah. It's also takes place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so ties in with all the ideas we're talking about. But if I compared it to, obviously Doctor Who should be the shoo-in, but then you remember the Hugo Awards is not like the Pulitzer Prize or the Oscars where there's like Academy voting or board voting. The Hugo Awards are voted by the attendees of Worldcon. Right. So it's public opinion that wins.
It's the plebes.
And I think the Jessica Jones, like in retrospect, it's very, very important because I was a victim of assaults and muggings, and when you look at Jessica Jones in light of that, like a lot of people who were victims of rape and sexual assault identify really, really strongly with that show and that character. So I think that kind of drives it's the more emotional and social storytelling elements that probably drove the voting, which I can respect, even though I would say the Doctor Who thing should win. Definitely should have won. I understand why Jessica Jones won. And if you look at all the other categories, so I think the novel, I don't have a list on me at the moment, but I think the person who won the novel, a black female writer, and I think all the winners were actually all female writers this year for the Hugo Awards. So we're seeing that this is where, again, I talk a lot about art and society crossing over a lot, and you see it right now, the social aspects and changes do really influence the art. And definitely, I guess that will be a lead-in for when we talk about the stuff happening in Zootopia, how we could view art in that lens now. Especially how Zootopia came right after, the Ferguson stuff and all the police brutality stuff we keep on hearing now, and of course, with people, I don't want to make it a political thing, but the atmosphere America is in right now, and how people see Zootopia probably differently than if this stuff that wasn't around.
No, it's
you know what I'm saying.
It's part of the zeitgeist for this year's set of movies. We need to acknowledge it, I guess.
Yeah, you take over. I've been trying to tiptoe not to offend anybody, but you take over. So
well, I mean, it gets kind of back to what I was saying because we were talking about the title coming up on the screen. That's kind of how we got on this tangent, I think. And
which is fine because nothing else happened. So
but it just kind of boom impacted up on the screen. The title's up there. And, we're saying doing it that way as opposed to having it show up maybe when she finally gets to the city later on. I don't know, and this is just the feeling I get from it, is that I feel like it was a very anticipated movie. So I don't know how much that really influenced their decision to make the title show up that way, but the way it just kind of impacts there, it's like, if you're sitting in the theater and you've wanted to watch this movie for months and months and you've heard about it, it's going to provide this moment of, you've been anticipating it this whole time, and here it finally is. There it is. Big dramatic, like, boom, there it is. Here it is, right for you. So that's an important thing to look at is what sort of climate was going on while this movie was being made. What were people saying about it before it was released? That kind of thing all has an influence on the final product, for sure.
And it's funny because we aren't scripted, but that's a perfect lead-in. So our podcast, we're trying to base it off the Star Wars Minute, and every time, I guess, a new guest or a new season of Star Wars Minute comes out, they basically ask the guest and the other co-hosts do you remember the first time you saw Star Wars or you heard about it? Do you remember the trailers that came out when you were a kid? And I guess that works perfectly for us because I guess this definitely blew up around the same time. I think it blew up within the animation communities and the furry communities. But what do you remember about when you first heard and saw about the Zootopia trailer, and then I guess leading up to the movie before we see the movie? I guess we'll say that for another one.
Probably the same thing went through my head that went through, I imagine, a lot of people's heads was, oh man, a furry movie. Just like, that's what this is gonna be. No matter what Disney tries to do with it, the way they've designed this is just a furry movie. And I remember after I saw it, I had made the joke, like, man, people going to see Zootopia, people go in, furries come out. That was the first thing that went through my head. It's like, it's a city and they're all animals. This is a furry movie. Awesome.
Yeah, I wasn't blown away when I first saw it, to be honest, the trailer. But yeah, that's the thing that went through my head, because like we're both active within the brony community, which again we said has overlap with the furry community. So I think I first saw it reblogged on Tumblr a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should say, like, so it's out there. Like, there are different perspectives on the furry fandom. I have no qualms with it whatsoever. I've got a lot of friends that are furries. I don't consider myself part of it, but I understand why it exists, and I think it's a neat little phenomenon. So I thought, you know what, if this is how this movie is going to be viewed, I have no problem with that.
Who knew that our podcast about Zootopia would have to tiptoe around things like not offending furries or feminists or all this different stuff?
That's how I like my
people who like
borderline
people who like Suicide Squad and people who don't like it. So. Okay, so actually the first trailer that came out, I think I remember, was the one where they introduced Nick Wilde, played by
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman. I knew it was something Bateman, but
Michael from Arrested Development.
And you see him first, he's like all naked technically because animals are supposed to be naked, and then once he realizes, oh, wait, I'm naked, clothing comes on, and you see the other animals in the background. It pans out. Yeah. Judy the bunny comes on, and I think that was the first trailer, right?
I don't know. I don't really pay huge attention to when trailers come out.
That's definitely what I remember, and that's when I thought, oh great, this is gonna be one of those furry movies. And it's funny because I saw it in theaters the day before the furry convention here in Dallas takes place. So the con was called Fur or something. Sorry.
No way, it had fur in the name? I don't believe
it's something.
You.
Okay, it was a Dallas furry convention. I actually have the badge right here, but they don't print the name on the badge. Furry Fiesta, that's it. Furry Fiesta.
Oh, I think I heard
So, I saw it in theaters like the day before Furry Fiesta. And
no, hold on. Quick interjection. Is Dallas also the town that hosted Fiesta Equestria?
Yes, I think so. I remember because Dallas was home to 3 pony conventions.
Do all of them just use the word fiesta in them? Is that just a thing?
I don't... You know... I should know. I'm the historian for these conventions. I think so. Like Furry Fiesta's here.
I think it's just because it's so far south.
Brony Fiesta.
Probably just like.
But then I think you see a lot of cons in different cities kind of take on, like you had Midwest Fur Fest,
Northwest,
and you have Midwest Brony Fest.
Everfree Northwest.
But yeah, you have Midwest Fur Fest and then Midwest Brony Fest. So I mean.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they like local regions take on different names.
It's almost like the people running the Brony cons are people who used to staff furry cons. No way.
Okay, that's a topic for another con because. So I was there the day before a FurryCon was supposed to take place, and the theater was right by the hotel where the FurryCon was supposed to take place. So I actually thought the theater would be full of furries. Surprisingly, not. There wasn't, which surprised me because a YouTube reviewer, Adam, who does the Your Movie Sucks reviews. Mm-hmm. He, I guess he's a closeted furry, I don't know. He's the one who did the Cool Cat review that got Cool Cat popular. But he was also seeing the movie right as a furry convention was in his town. And he said, like, there's a bunch of people in, like, fursuits, it was packed of furries, and they were, like, kind of awkward because they would, like, when the dogs were howling in the movie, they would howl and do all this stuff. And luckily that wasn't my experience. I think my experience was just, like, a typical family. Like, there's just a bunch of parents and their kids. Mm-hmm. And one of the kids cried in the movie. It's funny because I assumed that a lot of furries would be there, but there wasn't. The only time I think that I ever had a bunch of fursuiters in the movie theater was when I saw Dark Knight Rises.
Really?
For some reason, there was a bunch of fursuiters there, and they were all wearing their fursuits in the theater, which was kind of weird. That's another story. So yeah, I kind of remember my experience of seeing Zootopia. I didn't come in with any impression. I think like a lot of people were divided on Nick because they thought he looked like, oh, he's a cool character. I want to draw fan art of him. And there are people who are like, look at him, he looks like a douchebag. Why would anyone like this purposely,
a sly fox? How creative.
Yeah, sly looking character. But then when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I was impressed. And I had to finish the entire movie first before I formed an opinion, because at first I didn't think I was liking it. Like the Shakira song, which was the main theme of the movie, I didn't like the song at all. But now it's my favorite song.
Which
but
song?
I guess like I could the Try Everything.
Oh yeah, Try Everything. Yeah.
I guess when we get to that minute, I could tell you the minute when I finally changed and formed an opinion on the movie that I liked it. But I think for the first part, I was just like, okay. My memories of it was actually I have the I guess the unpopular opinion. I'm a person who likes film, television, comics, books, and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Not really for stories or for characters. I like it for the art. So I like the art of storytelling. I like how different mediums are utilized to tell a story. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a person who really likes commercialized franchise types of movies and stuff. And when I went to theaters, like the trailers that came on, I think you had like Ice Age 5 or something. You had Angry Birds movie. You had The Life of Pets, which was an obvious Toy Story ripoff. And you had all these like crude animated CGI movies, which I thought were, once again, typical Hollywood cash cows, cash grabs. I was thinking in my mind, this is a sad state for animation. Of course, I always look at things negatively. And then I was like, I hope Zootopia is not like this. And then I see Zootopia and I was like, no, this changed my opinion on everything.
Oh, wow.
You remember your first experience, I guess?
Seeing the movie?
Yeah, like, did you have the experience where your bunch of furries were in your theater?
As far as I know, there weren't any furries there. I mean, again, they don't all wear fursuits all the time, so maybe there were some furries just incognito. But I first saw it with a bunch of friends from my high school, and I remember just going in thinking like, oh yeah, it's the furry movie, I'm so excited, I've wanted to see this for a while, and I think all of us wanted to see it, and No, it wasn't with high school friends. It was with some friends from Everfree. The second time I saw it was with some high school friends. But the first time I saw it was at a mall theater with some of my friends from Everfree, and we went and saw, and we were all joking like, oh yeah, it's the furry movie. This is what we've been waiting to see.
Wait, so how many times do you see in theaters then?
In theaters, I have seen it twice.
Okay.
And I think
3 times.
Twice total is just how many times I've seen it. First time was at a mall theater, like, very close to when it came out. Second time was at one of those single theaters with one screen where it's discounted tickets and discounted snacks, but it's several months behind when it normally would have been showing. So we saw that again. Yeah, so I've seen it twice. And my impression going in was just like, this is something I've wanted to see for a while. I really hope it lives up to the hype.
Well, okay, what do you remember about the hype being around it then? Like, you said, you kept on mentioning you remember the hype around it, and to be honest, maybe it's because I was trying to disconnect myself from the internet. I don't remember the hype, aside from, like, the small fringes of the community.
See, now
but
that's
what was the hype around it?
Maybe,
like, was it hype because it was a Disney movie, or hype because...
It depends, because most of my online impression of it, like, other than me actually seeing the trailers in theaters and online and stuff, it was mostly people talking about it on Tumblr and Facebook and that kind of thing. So this might not be, like, the best clear sample of how most people were getting hyped for it, but for me, it was mostly just seeing a lot of jokes about it being the furry movie. That's a recurring theme. Furry movie, furry movie, furry movie. Oh my gosh, it's a furry movie. But everyone seemed to be really thrilled with the quality of the animation. I mean, that's not a surprise with Disney movies. It's a fresh story, too. It's not a retelling, like a lot of Disney movies tend to be. That's what's so interesting. All these characters that people associate as being, Disney princesses. Well, before they were Disney princesses, they were just princesses.
Yeah.
They were just classic folk tales or Brothers Grimm, that kind of thing.
Or even stuff like, was it Lion King was based off the Japanese anime
Kimba the White Lion.
and also Hamlet is basically ripped from Hamlet. Even things like Big Hero 6, which is a recent movie I love, is based off the Marvel comic Big Hero 6. Of course, now Disney owns Marvel, they could do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. This is like, I think since Wreck-It Ralph is the only other one I can remember that was kind of an original thing, but that uses video game characters as well. So I guess, yeah, this is the first real original Disney movie we have probably seen in recent memory. But then again, I'm not a big person who keeps up to date with Disney movies, so...
But again, I mean, to be perfectly fair, just because Disney is adapting a classic fairy tale doesn't mean that it's unoriginal. A lot of what Disney introduced to those fairy tales have basically become the default for how those stories are told. The the litmus test for determining like what is the canon of the story. There are variations all over the place, but people will often use Disney.
Yeah, like Cinderella has been retold from China to Egypt many times over. Yeah, but their version is unique.
Sure.
Or Beauty and the Beast. So the original Beauty and the Beast, the servants in the castles weren't transformed into inanimate objects and furniture. In some versions, they were transformed to animals. In the other versions, they weren't even around. So, but the version we remember of Beauty and the Beast is, you have a talking clock and you have a talking candle.
Yeah,
Something like that.
I mean, that's another thing that Disney has done occasionally is they've kind of made things a bit more kid appropriate as well. Not that these fairy tales aren't kid appropriate, but just that over the years they've had to adapt to modern systems. Like in the actual archaic accounts of the story of Sleeping Beauty, the prince doesn't kiss her to wake up; he rapes her or something.
Yeah, or actually, it's funny. I remember, like, that used to be a tidbit fact, clickbait type stuff. People would say, "Did you know that the original version of this quote unquote Disney movie was actually much darker? Like, the Little Mermaid died and turned to foam at the end, or the wicked stepsisters and Cinderella got their eyes pecked out." They would say all this stuff that they would connect to a darker version. But then, in the recent years, people would say, that darker version people say the Disney movies are based off? Well, actually, those stories were purposely written to be dark, and they're actually based off an older myth that was actually more kid-friendly and lighthearted. So this goes around in circle.
Here's where we get back to the archy part of the word archetype. You've got this old story that goes back ages and ages and ages, and you just see the same narrative persist through different characters and what seem like completely different stories that are actually basically the same thing, and it's just sort of this idea that's been passed through the human narrative mindset, I guess.
Yeah. It's like what I talked about in my panel, the idea that all these stories, I think people use the hero's journey as the archetype, but I use the Alan Moore term, the Great Literary Game, and the Harold Bloom term, Anxiety and Influence, where all works are basically misinterpretations of a predecessor's work, but the misinterpretation changes it to become its own thing, but you can see roots of all these earlier works progressing back. But again, topic for another time. And I think, actually, for our first test run episode, this has been okay. And I think, good time to end there, right?
Sure.
Perfect time. All right. So I guess if we ever do upload this, if you're hearing this now, that means we did upload it. That was our first episode of the Zootopia Minute. Join us next time as we talk about minute 1 to 2. So, see you next time. Bye, everybody.